Hey everybody, my name is Jeff and I'm with Morvold Press. And today I was going to do a Dungeondraft map concept walkthrough for one of the maps that is the Hall of the Dwarven Forge Lords. So I was going to walk through the map. I was going to talk a little bit about how I designed it, what the idea behind it was, some of the way that I built it, and then just the idea of how players might move through it or utilize it. I thought that might help you not only from the concept of how I approach maps, but how I build them, but also just this map in particular. What is its purpose and how could you potentially use these? So I'm going to jump right into the actual Dungeondraft file of the map itself. And so this actually started as an idea that I had. There's a series of dwarven maps that I've been putting together. It began with a large city called Muldoon, which is a 3-level map that I did. And the idea was that I would slowly build over a contiguous world where each map would lead to another map that would lead to another map, such that eventually you would have, several, 10 plus maps that were all linked together. So someone could arrive in the Dwarven city, they could make their way through it, they could have a lot of social engagements, they could move into some mines, they could then start to delve deeper into the mines, they could go down, a shaft into like some lower levels. There would be access to, say, the deep roads, then through the mountains that they would be able to travel those. And this was one of the locations along those deep roads that I had imagined, which was the Hall of the Forge Lords. And I had envisioned there being these dwarven forge lords that are sort of separated from the rest of the dwarven communities. They're sort of on their own, they're autonomous. They're sort of like the most talented of the dwarven forge lords that are, the ones that forge magical items as well as just masterful works. They concern themselves, they spend, tens and hundreds of years, refining their craft and working on things that purely they're interested in. So it began here. You can see with the actual deep road just coming through, moving left to right, with the idea that then I could build onto, the road continuing to the right or continuing to the left, and those could connect to caverns or connect to other things. But I like the idea of there being this deep road that the party could travel, and then they could arrive, say, at the gates of the actual facility. So at the gates of the facility, obviously, there are some portcullis they have to move through, and then obviously a reinforced gate that they could then try to move through. I figured the dwarves, being the suspicious and protective folk that they are, wouldn't just let anybody wander into their very important place without some defenses. So, and as you can imagine, the Underdark has a fair amount of nasty critters and creatures crawling about, for which you would need some large scale attack options. So we got a couple ballista pointed at the doorways there, which is nice. Kind of forces a fun little encounter with some threat. Obviously, the guards have a little table here where they can hang out. They got some arms and some access to archery and other equipment as needed. So a couple notes here. When I design maps in general, you'll kind of notice there's a couple things, conventions that I like to follow. One is you'll see these kind of layers here, which have this tightly packed stone. Looks like walkways, looks like, really nice, I don't know, laid stone. I really like that effect. And actually you can achieve that effect by going to, when you're building and using the building tool, there's an object called smart stone is one way to lay a building. And so actually, if you take that, for example, and move it across, say, like here, you'll see it will continue in that way. However, it only works when it's perpendicular. If smart stone is ever kind of catty corner to itself, you'll notice that it breaks the nicely laid stone and kind of turns into this tile, kind of dungeon tile appearance. And so you have to be careful about how you use it. But if you use it correctly, then you can get it to kind of have that really nice look. Now you can notice here, I used this tile, which is the same as this tile, but this is a different color. And that's because I likely had gone in and changed it from the default color, which you can do with this button down below the building tile. So if I select this and try to match the color, I would just kind of drag it over to the side to get rid of the yellow tint and maybe down just a little bit. It looks like it might be a little darker. And then I would just try to draw it next to it. That I can tell is still a little bit lighter than the one next to it. So I can go back in it and make it a little bit darker still. And it's almost there, still a little bit darker. Change that, and hopefully that'll be close enough. I won't be saving this, so I'm not too worried about it. I also, one of the design aesthetics that I wanted for this kind of dwarven community was a lot of times in buildings, I will create lights with little lanterns. So I'll go down and grab this lantern asset like this. And I will go into a wall and I'll place that next to the wall, and I'll take this torch and actually just use that as sort of a holder for the light. And then I will just go to the light tool, grab the color I want, grab this point light, and then put that over it, and there's my light. I use that a lot for many other buildings, mostly that I would think of as human buildings. I thought the dwarves would have something different. So I took the same object, which is the lantern object, but actually then just would turn it on its side and kind of embed it into the wall. And I liked the way that that looked. I felt like that would be something more that they would use, where it's maybe more magically lit. It's maybe like an luminous stone, or some magic or some other way that they keep the illumination going, rather than oil or pitch or fire or something of that nature. I also just think it has a particular look and style to it that matches well with the dwarves. It's very angular, geometric, which I associate with sort of building and dwarves. So I liked how that looked and how that turned out, and that's how I made those. So they arrive here at this initial area where the guards can kind of check them in and make sure they're all good. One of the other design things that I like to do is I don't like linear systems, because I feel like it limits options for players. I want players to be able to move around. I want them to be able to choose left or right. I want them to be able to say stealth or attack. I want them to make choices while they're playing, and encourage them to think about how they want to approach something, rather than always being like, well, you're in a room and there's one door on the south side, so they have to go through the door. And if through that door is combat, then they're just always going to choose combat every time. But if there's an east door and a south door, and the east door is they can maybe sneak around and the south door is combat, then it's a nice choice for them to have, and at least give them the opportunity. I also find that multiple ways in and multiple ways out gives you, the dungeon master, a lot of room and flexibility for how you set your stage, as well as the players. So if the players are really making horrible decisions, there might be a way they can escape rather than being trapped in a room. It also gives you some options where if the players are just like, taking care of business easily and totally overthrowing all of your well-planned adventure, and you just decide, I need to throw some more guards, or I need to have something happen, having multiple entrances and exits lets you have that happen without it feeling forced or weird. It has, they have to worry about that other door, or if they worry about that second passage or whatever. So anyway, you'll see a lot of choices and a lot of hallways where, maybe like in a home, it wouldn't make sense to have like a hallway along the periphery of the walls. Like the most buildings would maybe, like, this would just be part of the room itself to save space. But you'll see that I do that a lot, where I have the hallways span the edges of the buildings. And that is generally to give the players options to move through the area and be able to kind of go, I can go up and around this way. I can go straight through this way. I can go down and around that way. I can go down and around this hallway and out to here and then back up. So, I mean, there's literally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 potential paths just from this point to this point, which makes it a lot of fun if you're trying to avoid guards or encounter guards or escort someone or rescue someone. So those are all things and design decisions that I make along the way. So from here, they have a couple of options. Obviously, if they come south, then what we have here are some kind of small scale guard barracks with what I imagine there being maybe like an officer of types of this little unit. Over here, we have what looks to be, kind of a miner or a craftsman or of some type, maybe a family. We got a couple beds, bunk beds here and a main bed here. And so, you come in and there's a work table and obviously some kind of guard, but maybe it's someone a little bit more important. Over here, we obviously have a much larger barracks where you can have more guards be stationed. And then above that, you kind of have a commander's room with a large table and several places to sit, a big map to look around. And then you have a fancier bedroom that might be for a commander of this group. Down below that, then you've got a nice big like mess hall with kind of an open kitchen kind of place where people can come and cook if they want. Have a lot of drinks. Obviously, you need to have that meat on hand if they're going to be delving in the Underdark or protecting Forge Lords. You need to have a good drink, or you're not going to have a very good time. And then I've got a nice little kitchen here. The kitchen, of course, needs a little pantry, so we've got that. I don't need to be gesturing with a lantern this whole time. And so that obviously flows all very nicely. I also thought, they probably would have a quick grab pantry for day-to-day activities, but then they should also have a much larger area where they can keep all of their stores down below. And then over to the east of that, we have kind of a nice library with several places to sit and tables and everything, nice, comfortably lit. And then to the south of that, I figured there might be a dwarven mage at this location that has just, another library. I thought this could offer some opportunities to, if you wanted to have a teleportation circle, if you wanted to have a way to get to this place from other dwarven locations, if you wanted to have a summoning circle, it's just kind of a catch-all, right? It's just a magical circle that could be used for whatever you want to use it for. And then obviously next to that, we have their personal residence with their bed and desk and everything. I will note a couple things here for, how to make these things. These are all layered objects. So, this is a table with some carpets layered atop it, with a symbol layered atop it, with some specific lighting. So I can rebuild that just to kind of show you how I make those things. So I would go to objects. I would go down to find, say, the table that I want. So here's a table, and I would size it appropriately. And I would put it there. Then, and you have to be up here, you'll notice there's layers of everything I'm choosing. So I chose a layer 1. I could go, let's just go ahead and choose layer 2. You do want to be purposeful about the layers you choose, because it will have a big impact on how easy it is to add things below or above it. So I always try to pick 2 for sort of starting furniture. That way it's easy for me to put stuff beneath it like chairs, and easy for me to put stuff on top of it like tablecloths or decorations, candles, things of that nature. So then I would go up to my carpets, which is what I use for kind of decorative tablecloths, for carpets themselves, whatever I want to use it for. I would go to layer 2. I would pick over. So it's going to go over my table. I'll pick the initial color, which will use this yellow here. So I basically center this across, and then I'll click, and then I rotate I just push my mouse wheel up, and it will move it, basically just that slight bit. I'll do it again, and I just kind of go all the way around the circle. And then I will take another color. We can pick whatever we want. We'll pick this nice red. Scale it down just a little bit. I'll go over it and say, okay, that's a nice size of border around. So I'll click it, move it, click it, and so on. We'll repeat that. And so that gives us this real nice star pattern. And then if we scroll down, then we can find, this symbol that I'd used on top, and we'll pick the gold color because it looks real nice. When you kind of maintain, when the outside color is the same as the inside color, kind of get consistency. And then you can use the light, obviously come in here, and you can start with a big light and then kind of bring it in tighter, and you get kind of like this nice little glowing effect on the table. So that's kind of how we achieve this, and how you can make those kinds of things. And you can, obviously no single one of those elements looks all that fantastic, but when you layer them all together, then I think you get a really nice view. You get a really nice piece that really pops, and it looks really cool. It looks like a wizard's table, or it looks like a really fancy table. And that's something that I'm going for. So we'll take that off. I did the same. I took, I think, a light with that. So I think we wanted to keep this light and get rid of these objects. Okay. Incidentally, I did the same thing with this. These are 2 different objects layered on top of each other, and then lights kind of building this effect of like a glowing circle. So from there, that's this sort of, if we scroll out, that's sort of this left whole section. It's kind of like the guards, the kitchen, the guards' kitchen, this library, this mage, and storage. And so that's what I felt like would live in this sort of northwest part of the forge. Before we get too far, I'll kind of show you the whole map, because it's pretty big. It's 50 by 100. So if we use 5 feet for each, it's 250 by 500 feet. So it's a pretty big place. So then we'll zoom back in here. So obviously from the initial area that we were, there's a nice hallway that I've got some of these, carved stone relief designs into the walls. These could be of, various prominent people, prominent places, maybe works of art that they'd created. I always liked that about dwarven culture, so I wanted to integrate that. Then over on the right-hand side, we have kind of like this throne room setup. Now, we talk about the Forge Lords, and they're not necessarily leaders of a dwarven community. I figured that they are probably home, or they play host to members of other dwarven royalty. So when those members of dwarven royalty may come to call, I felt like there might be a place for them to be able to hold court or to be able to feel, there's a place of their stature that they could be. So, I created this nice throne. I had these rugs underneath that. I kind of created a little, maybe a little banner that is above their throne. Nice big fire and obviously tables for them all to sit. We've got, again, multiple entrances. We have kind of like the main doors, but we also have these little side doors that can be used for underlings or messengers or servants or people sneaking in or not wanting to make a big commotion while we have someone that's, coming to meet the king or meet a council or something of that nature. So that's what the purpose of this room is. Then we have this really huge hallway. And one of the other things I try to integrate into these maps are really big spaces where if you do want to create a large social encounter, a show of force, a whole bunch of dwarves that have showed up to stop someone from entering, or a clash of two clans, or you want to have combat happen, where maybe some people are attacking this place, or the party for whatever reason has come at odds with the dwarves and they're going to have some huge fight. Then we have this, really large hallway, which is quite a few squares across and a huge amount of squares down. Unfortunately, at many maps that you'll encounter that are made by people, you very rarely run into a situation where you can't cast a spell because you're not close enough, or you can't cross the map in 2 turns. Because it's just so small. You're on like a 30 by 30 grid or something. In 2 moves, you're halfway across the map. So in this case, this would take a huge amount of time to cross this huge hallway. And I also try to integrate, things like these big pillars where they can provide cover and to give you some more interesting ideas. Aesthetically, I thought it would be cool, since this is a dwarven forge lord hall, that there'd be this huge kind of axe in carpet, or hammer or axe, whatever you want to think of it, in kind of a carpet on the ground. So basically, they're all layered carpets with, again, these little magical symbols. We've kind of got the handle down here and obviously the top up here. And I really like the way that looked, and kind of gives, just reinforces the feel of the overall map. So we progress from, the top, which is guarded by all the dwarves and this small kind of contingent of guards, down into the actual city, if you will. So it's kind of a small scale city of people who assist and work for the Forge Lords. So we come in through these double doors, and we will enter have options to enter a couple of places. We can enter here, we can enter here. This, I imagine, just sort of being a large communal feasting area. It's got a door that's connected over here to some more. These are some more guard barracks for maybe guards that man the Forge Lord Hall itself, not the entrance. So we've got 1, 2, 3 different barracks, and then we've got kind of a little sparring circle, and maybe 1 officer here, and then maybe like a captain of these guards who has a office, and then a nicer quarters here. For many of the personal quarters and stuff, I will try to give them, some clutter in their thing that you could use. You've got maybe this guy uses an axe and a short sword, or he's got a couple of letters on his desk, and that could be reports of something that's integrated into the story you're telling. Maybe the people need to come in here and read these or steal these, or they need to steal his axe. That's why I leave things like that, so that you can kind of make up stuff to be able to link that to the story you're telling, and put that into perspective and play with the maps that I provide. So again, we can come in, enter here, come through, and then be able to exit here. So there's lots of ways through the facility that you could be sneaking, hiding, entering, coming in different ways. Of course, one of the things I think is very important in maps is that they feel real. So here we have a couple, some privies and a couple bathtubs, literally, that the dwarves can come and use. And that, I think, lends to the realism. It makes it feel like a real place, that it's alive. You can kind of see the dwarves moving through their day, walking through these halls, visiting here, coming in to eat. We have a small kitchen that obviously services this specific area. On the other side, I think this to me is more of like a gathering hall, a place where we're not here to eat. We're here to share in news, or we're going to celebrate. Obviously, we have plenty to drink, lots of huge tables, a sense of community, a sense of belonging and togetherness, which I think I also associate with like dwarven clans. So we have those two first when you walk in. We have, again, a nice big open area that could be used for social interactions when someone first arrives, or even for combat engagements. I also like having, a variety of little statues around. This might be a particular warrior, might have some cultural understanding or relevance to the place, or you may just say this is just a statue and they love art. They love some art, so they put a statue there. So maybe we'll start on the left, go down, and then and then curl around to the right. So over on the left, I have kind of like the little mini city. These are all the kind of like the personal dwellings of the folk that operate in this area. So there are several different homes, right? Here's a little, little tiny home for maybe one or two people. Here we have a larger home where there's a main bed, but also a couple bunk beds, and they've got their own little stove and they've got their own little table. So there's, a variety of places where everyone could live and operate. We have this nice statue, and then beneath that, we have some nice just aesthetic candles and illumination that just give it a different look. Kind of gives it a neat feel to the neighborhood, if you will. Obviously, when you're underground and you're in rough hewn stone, or you're in a totally constructed area, it's the neighborhood is going to feel culturally very different than it is for those of us who live in outdoor locations or in other cities where we're used to seeing grass and trees and stuff. So I thought it'd be interesting to try to denote some of the decor that you would see in like a dwarven city. So as you can see, there are many different, I tried to obviously make all of these feel fairly different, keep the color schemes different so that to the eye, it still is very pleasing and interesting. You can easily tell which rooms are which because this one's red, this one's green, this one's blue, this one's a different blue. So it should be fairly easy to see when ones are connected, like this is red, so these are the same apartment or house. Whereas, this is one blue, this is a different blue, and they don't share any kind of entrances, so they're different. So that is another kind of design aesthetic that I try to do, is to keep the rooms fairly different so that visually you can keep them straight, but it also doesn't feel like I'm coming into room number 5 again. They're all different, they all laid out different, they all have different components, they all are dressed very differently. This home has a couple of tools, some pickaxes and some scrolls and a map. So that person might be more into like mining, just like this person's got these rocks with crystals and a hammer, and they're breaking them apart. So that's something that they're into, and you can again work those into your story. So they're all different. Every home is different. Here in the middle, we have kind of two occupational positions. We have two what I would think is maybe like trade scribes, to folk that you have to come in and talk to in order, when you come in, I'm gonna make a purchase. I'm going to interact with the Hall of the Forge Lords. I've come to provide materials, or I've come to buy materials, or I've come to buy finished product, or I've come to make a commission, whatever the case may be. I think that in my mind, this is where people would come to kind of catalog that and make those arrangements. So, I've got their nice little, these shelves set up, lots of scrolls hanging around. I have this nice table where they've got a whole bunch of paperwork in these little bins, and they've got a bunch of stacked metal, piles of gold, and they're keeping track on their ledgers. And I like the fact that there was maybe like 2 of them, just sort of trying to stave off corruption by having a two check system there. And then to the left of that, I felt like this would be a cool place where this is people where they bring ore, they buy materials, they're getting shipments of things, they're keeping track of all of those various shipments, where they're coming from, what orders are coming in. I like the idea of this having these scrolls and these little slats. They've got a big scale here where they're measuring stuff that's coming in, so they can know how to price it, that kind of stuff. So I've got these 2 sort of functional areas where you can have that kind of role play or interaction. Then down to the south, we have, again, a nice big open area with a couple of big statues. Again, we love art. We got a nice big fountain, so we have kind of a water source that we can readily available. So we're like, where do they get their water? People I know may not come up and it may not be relevant to your campaign, but people ask that stuff all the time. Like, where do these people throw out their trash, and how do they go to the bathroom, and where do they get their water, and what do they do with their dead? And, these are all kinds of questions people have. And the more of those that you can answer, the more full and real and immersive your place is going to feel. So I always like having these kinds of things be there. So obviously we've got a nice big fountain. It's got these nice, braziers next to it, very atmospheric. And then we've got these 2 statues. So over here, we've got some more homes and some more privies and baths. These could be homes of other dwarves. These could be visitors' quarters. If you have people that, if you need to assign a party a place to stay, like they could come and stay here, because a lot of these have multiple beds, and there can be 4 people here and 3 people here and so on. So I just felt like that would be useful to have a few more rooms there. As you can see over to the right here, we have a shrine, little dwarven shrine. So we've got some benches they can come in. We've got some dwarven statue with some hammers and a hammer and shield, and it's got a little design on it. It's lit, so kind of atmospheric. So that's always nice to have a place where you can have a religious tie, and that way, and it's nondescript, right? So you can tie it into your own world. It can be a dwarven god, or a specific dwarven god, or a non-dwarven god. Just have some other presence there that you would want. And then also down below here is the actual forge itself. So we have 3 forge lords. So we've got 3 different ways kind of onto our ramp, surrounded by some, of course, lava and some heat being funneled into the area. We've got our 3 different anvils, 3 different hammers, and 3 different forges where we can be doing all of our stuff. And we got some ore sitting here. We've got our hammers at the ready. They've got some other areas and bellows, and they've got some water here to be able to use in their crafting process. We got some, kind of fun wheels here attached to this big demon-looking head that's pouring in lava from who knows what from the outside. I would imagine that you can turn on and off. So that's kind of what I wanted to denote there. We obviously have over here, these bins would be probably more full of whatever you want to put in there. So if you want them to work with mithril or work with iron or steel or whatever you're using, you can put that in there. They have these carts. They can use the carts to bring it to the forge itself. Over to the right, I wanted to, there always needs to be some treasure rooms. I thought there could be one sort of generic treasure room that has a bunch of gold, a bunch of chests, maybe some dragon eggs, some different things. And then I also had one here that is just all chests. I thought this might be an interesting puzzle room or a trap room. If people come into this room and maybe they can't open the chest, they have to figure out some order to open the chests, or some trap happens, or they have to do something in the right order in order for any of them to open at all. Just something that might be an interesting thing. So that's another thing I try to do with these maps, is to present opportunities for you to create something more than I've thought. I try to give you materials, and then you can kind of think of what you would want to use that for yourself. So kind of moving from the southern area, the part that we have left now is this right-hand side, which is the homes of the actual Forge Lords, and then up here along this path. So we'll go along that way. So here we can see we come down the hallway. This leads to the 3 homes of the Forge Lords themselves. And so in this case, I thought we have, a Hammer Lord, Axe Lord, and a Sword Lord. And so each one kind of has their own space. They got their own bedroom. They've got their own little workstation, where this guy's obviously working on hammers. This guy's actually working on axes. This guy's working on swords. They're all different in terms of how they're laid out, how they have their desks. They all have their own little private baths and privies, which you imagine they would want to. Some of them are more social than others. So I tried to keep them all a little bit different and lay out a little bit different, but obviously have the same conventions that I'm at the Sword Lord, I'm at the Hammer Lord, and so on. So after we curve around, so if we leave their domain and then walk back out the hallway out to the right and come down here, we have 3 different rooms. The first one here I imagined being like an experimentation room. There would probably be other servants here that are working resources for the Forge Lords. Like they would tell them, I need this kind of crystal, or I need these kinds of gemstones, or I need this kind of blade, or this kind of hilt or something. And they go off and they kind of figure out how to make it and refine the pieces and do research and whatnot. Over to the left, I thought it would be cool if then there was kind of a grand library of blueprints and instructions on how to craft things, on how to make weapons of power, how to make armor, and many other creations. So again, this place could be used for a lot of social encounters. It could be a resource for you where the players want to go build some special weapon or some set of armor, or they want to have something crafted that none of them can do themselves, and you need a place where that can happen. They need to quest and go find it. So then they could come to a place like this. They could seek audience with the Forge Lords. They could then hopefully get permission. They're granting them the right to go ahead and make it or have it made, but maybe they have to create, follow some quest or do some service for the Forge Lords in order to obtain their services. And then over to the right, I felt like this could be, maybe like the head archivist or the head researcher or something for the Forge Lords, and you'd have a nice little abode and private quarters for all of that business. And then up here was sort of the hall of the Forge Lords. So they come here and sit on their mighty thrones, and they talk about forgy things and crafty things and, angles and hardness and toughness and whatnot, whatever Forge Lords talk about. But this could be a fun set piece for players if they want to come and have an audience with all three and discuss something of import, or have an event happen here that everyone is in. Again, it's a decent sized space. It's got these pillars. It's got some other things that are in it that are kind of fun. So that is the Hall of the Forge Lords. I hope that the walkthrough has kind of given you a better impression of what the map is for. Along with a couple of the design elements that I made, sort of the way that I design maps in general, and then, a couple of design choices as well as, actually how did I make this and how did I make that? If you have any questions about any of the other pieces that you saw here today, any of the ways that I did things, feel free to put it in the comments. And I will hope to do another one for you soon. I will leave you with a fun little thing. This was actually a restored version of a previous map that I'd made, which was an original idea. And the idea was a living dungeon, meaning dungeons for a long time in Dungeons and Dragons had always been presented as basically a big collection of rectangles with traps and monsters to kill. And they may have had some sort of semblance of what this was. I mean, it would have been called a temple, right? This was a temple, or these were ruins, or this was an old city or whatever. But there really wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to what all the rooms were for. Who lived there? What did they do? What purpose did they hold? Why was it designed this way? And so my idea in building this was to say, I want this to eventually be a dungeon. So I want this to be a living, breathing place that has purpose and was designed with purpose, and can be used for those purposes, social encounters, resource locations, things of that nature. It could be a character backstory. They might be from here. They might be related to someone here, something of that nature. So all that certainly would be used. And then I wanted to build a version of this that is in the middle. It's not an old dusty dungeon full of just creatures and no dwarves, but it also is not a pristine, in its prime location. And that map is actually called the sort of Dungeon of the Forge Lords. And in that one, we have had this huge problem erupt in the middle of their civilization and completely take out their walkway. And so we kind of have this north half and south half situation going on, where the way that I had presented it was the south half is infested by something that has come out of the crevasse, out of the rift. The north half still has the dwarves that are trying to figure out what to do. They've built a few barricades against things that maybe have come out of the pit. We also have sort of some strangeness going on here, where we've got some like beds and whatnot in this throne room, as well as the fire now holds what looks to be maybe dwarves in it. I thought this could be an interesting interplay between a group A of survivors here and a group B of survivors that have different notions of what we should do. Should we go and try and save our companions? Should we just, try to hold fast for support? I thought, for the purposes of the dungeon, the party would arrive. This group would be desperately trying to save the dwarves. This group would be saying, no, let's just wait, and trying to, maybe they've gone mad or assert some dominance. Maybe a local lord is here that's not connected to the Forge Lords, and they're trying to, claim dominance or leadership or authority or something of that nature. But they've gotten a bridge across, or maybe there is a bridge across that the enemy doesn't care about. And then down below, much of the map is the same. Outside, obviously, as you can see, the web and whatnot sort of indicating that things are not good. But the idea was that things are still the same because this has just happened. This is very recent. And so the party has arrived maybe, days or a week or something after this has happened. So dwarves are still alive on the other side. The Forge Lords may still be alive. They might still be fine. And so it's important that this resource be saved. And so the idea was that there's it's a dungeon, but it's alive. The people are all still there. It's in its heyday. There are allies that could be found. There are people who could be rescued. There are enemies to take up. There's a big bad guy that we need to take care of potentially. There's a threat to the forge. We don't want evil to be able to use the forge to make things. So there's a lot of different storylines that you could use with this idea. And then eventually I will make a version of this where the rift remains. We assume that the dwarves or the party or whomever it was not successful, and this place is now dead and deserted. And so all of these things will change. A lot of this will be broken, it will be abandoned. And so then it will be kind of your true big, dusty, old dungeon. But even then, it will still be a big, old, dusty dungeon with a sense of history and a sense of purpose. And so that's why I made this map the way that I did, and why I made the renovated version of it. So we could see it in its prime, we could see it when the event happened, and eventually we will see it once things have finished or been completed. So I hope you enjoyed this session. If you enjoy walkthroughs like this, please let me know so that I can do more. If you thought it was worthless, please also let me know so I don't do that. But anyway, please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and I hope to see you guys around. Thanks for listening.